welcome. And you join me and Matt for this episode of Gaming the System, the podcast where two intersectional feminists discuss the world of gaming, feminism, and how they interact. We're going to go slightly off-piste for this episode. We may have heard one of our previous ones. We're delving into the world of tennis for this episode. I am a massive tennis fan, follow it all the year round, and have been to Wimbledon basically pretty much every year since 2009. So quite a big fan of the sport. I don't play the sport, but I love to watch it. And this year there's been some interesting developments in terms of thinking about the game of tennis, the sport of tennis, in terms of how inclusive it is and how sexist it is as well, because it's definitely hit the headlines for being quite sexist generally. So we're going to have a chat on this episode about two major things that happened over the clay season, that sort of springtime, May into June, with the Madrid Open on clay and also the second Grand Slam of the year, the French Open, also played on clay. And we're also going to delve a little bit into Wimbledon in the lead up to Wimbledon, which starts next week. Very exciting times. So without further ado, I think I'll kick off this evening by asking you, Matt, your general thoughts on the topic and kind of where you wanted to begin.
Yeah, so I think it's a really interesting compression of tennis, big tennis things. So Wimbledon's probably the biggest date on the tennis calendar. And then French Open is probably the second biggest, given it's the only clay tournament. And then Madrid just being a little taster. Is it an ATP 1000?
That's right. It's one of the Masters 1000. I think there's about 9. I want to say 9. Let's go with 9 of those over the year. So they're like the level below a Grand Slam.
Yeah. So we've got Wimbledon, the biggest, French Open, second biggest, and then Madrid, which is one of the 9 other biggest ones. So it's not some small ATP 250 tournament where you could go, oh, they haven't got all the resources, they don't get all the best names. Starting off with Madrid. Madrid seems to have been the most controversial one this year.
Definitely.
From me looking back at it. And turns out Feliciano Lopez is the tournament director.
That's right. Yes, former, I think he was world number 1 and Grand Slam champion. I'll say this, I think he was Grand Slam champion, Feliciano Lopez of Spain. As is common for a lot of Spanish tennis players, is now tournament director in Madrid. He has been for a few years, but it was previously run by a person whose name I've forgotten, who's well known for being quite sexist anyway, really. So I guess that's where it stemmed from, a lot of this. Basically, the tournament this year was a series of feminist fails. Let's put it that way. It's one thing after another, and it all snowballed into this huge embarrassment of riches of embarrassments, by the end of which the tournament was falling over itself to try and correct these errors and not making a very good job of it, certainly. So I think one of the very first things that came up on the radar for a lot of people watching, which they would have been, as it's televised across the world, as one of the biggest tournaments, is the ball girls and boys are all models. They're all like professional models, so they all look very attractive. They're all very tall. And this was put in place a number of years ago, actually. So it's not the first year it's happened. But the outfits for the ball girls this year were particularly revealing around the midriff. And the skirts were quite short, and the male ball kids, they weren't wearing the same outfits, obviously. I'll see if I don't know if I can share my screen, see if I can find a picture of them. If you bear with me, I believe. Let's have a go at sharing that. Can you see this picture on the far side here? This is an example of the ball girl.
You're not sharing your screen
Am I
yet.
not? Oh, bear with. How awkward. The wonders of technology. That's interesting. I'm going to stop sharing. And I wonder how. See, this would have been perhaps better prepped. Fine. Let's try entire screen. Or not. No, window. No, Chrome tab. Share. Is that right?
Shall we pause for a moment?
Pause. Yes. We can pause. It's fine. It's all fine. Screen available to share. For those of you watching, please pay attention. For those of you listening, we'll try and describe as best we can. So I'm just going to share the screen now. You can see a quick Google search of Madrid tennis ball girls for this year. You can see the ball girls' outfits there, and they are not the best. They're quite tight-fitting tops, and they're kind of crop tops, so they're showing the tummy off, and the skirts are quite short and blue, and of course all the ball girls are models, as we mentioned before, so you can see that there is rather interesting. And then to correct this, as there have been many complaints throughout the 10 days, as is now the length of a Masters 1000 tournament rather than a week, they corrected it to this: big baggy shorts with midriffs and bare arms instead, which is an interesting choice to correct to, but I don't think it was the best move, to be honest, because it just looks very odd, and it's clearly like something you can tell they've done like because of all this furore over the outfits. It's a reactionary move rather than anything planned. What are your thoughts on those outfits, Matt?
It's just bad for everyone.
Yeah.
Do we know, are the ball girls, are they 18 and over?
I'm not sure. Let me see if I can find out. I know that because they all look quite old.
Yeah.
They don't look like children, which they are in Wimbledon, of course. They're all school kids. Let me check age. A mystery for us all. Age between 19 and 28. Interesting. Okay.
Well, that's better than
That's
under.
better than under 18, yes. Certainly.
Yeah. The question is why?
Yes.
Because it doesn't matter who the ball girls are.
And another caveat there for you is those particular ball girls in those particular outfits were only shown during the premiere matches of the day when most eyeballs would be on TV screens, which I think says a lot about why they were there. It's because sex sells, and that's what brings the eyeballs to the tennis, apparently, according to Madrid anyway.
But then there's the problem that there has never been, the market of sex has never been more saturated with content. You don't need, it's not like when there were only 3 TV channels and the closest you could come to seeing a naked woman were fucking lingerie catalogs. There's no like, you're not going to get any more people watching it because you've got the people who are watching it are going to be watching it. No one's going to go, and if we want to see attractive young women, there's infinite places to do that where the focus is actually on attractive young women instead of them just being stood there looking pretty, doing nothing.
Yeah. Definitely. Another thing that happened at Madrid, interestingly, it was Carlos Alcaraz's birthday during the tournament. And because he is the darling of Spain, the up-and-coming new Spanish talent, kind of the prince in waiting to take over from the king of clay, Rafa Nadal, he is a very good tennis player. Truth be told, he is now the world number 1 again. And so perhaps rightfully, he had a big celebration on court, had a big cake, and everyone watching, everyone taking his photos, and a big ceremony for that, to celebrate that. Conversely, Aryna Sabalenka, the women's world number 2, Belarusian, it was also her birthday during the tournament, and she received a much smaller cake. and her photograph was taken in the corridor of somewhere, presumably in the locker room, and there was no big celebration on court for her. I believe there was one other male player. Was it Holger Rune? I can't remember exactly. One of the other male players also had a birthday cake, and they had a video filmed of them and a slightly larger. It was like the middle-sized cake, which was interesting. But there was this whole thing that then kicked off on Twitter about how the size of the cake matters, and lots of people were arguing about it over Twitter, because what it does is represent how, obviously, there's overt sexism at play here. Whether they like it or not, it's a pretty obvious sign of which they value more, men's tennis or women's tennis. Yeah, so that was another thing that added to the litany of fails. But perhaps the most grievous thing that happened in Madrid after the women's final took place, I think it was on the Saturday, because most of the tournaments finish on a weekend. And the following day, before the men's final, the women's doubles tournament final was taking place. And because of what Iga Swiatek had said, the world number one in singles, when she won the title previously, the day before, she complained during her speech and said, well, we've had a lot of matches that finished at 2:00 in the morning, and I don't think that's very good, that kind of thing. And because she'd spoken out publicly during her trophy speech, that's the only reason I can think for them to not allow the women's doubles, either the runners-up or the champions, to speak during the finals trophy presentation ceremony. They were not allowed to give any speeches. As one of my favourite journalists and broadcasters, Catherine Whitaker of the Tennis Podcast, put at the time, they were essentially gagged because they didn't want them complaining or kicking up a fuss any more than what Iga had already done in her championship speech. And so they took to Twitter and wrote their speeches on Twitter and said, isn't this awful? We weren't allowed to speak for whatever reason during our doubles ceremony, and the outcry continued essentially. But yeah, so were they effectively gagged, do you reckon, Matt?
You really couldn't. If you and I were writing a satire about the misogyny in tennis, we really couldn't have come up with a more perfectly structured 3-act play than the ball girls they're older than usual, and they're only when it's the big men's matches, they have ball girl only.
Yeah. Only the women
teams
would come on, yeah.
That's odd. Why have you done that? Oh, what we were thinking, we made a mistake. Sorry. They'll wear baggy shorts from now on.
Yeah.
Right. And then a few days later, oh, look, Carlos Alvarez, it's his birthday. Well, number one. Ooh, well, awesome. Great birthday cake. Congratulations. And you go, oh, okay, that's a nice thing. And then you see, oh, it was a female tennis player's birthday as well. And instead, because I'm sure there are birthdays in every tournament, if there are 368 people in a tournament, then one of them's going to have a birthday at some point. And they go, oh, look, we gave her this small cake. And you have to go, oh, for good, maybe it's not as egregious overall as the sexualizing ball girls, but it's still a slap in the face. And that is so interesting, because do you know what Feliciano Lopez is doing next?
Well, isn't he trying to get into Wimbledon? I think has he got a wild card? He is trying to get into Wimbledon. Why? What's he doing next?
What job he's doing next?
No, I hadn't heard.
I'll save that to the end, because that would be this will be the finale of the satire. That bit. So I'll say this at the end of everything. So with the I find the wording of apologies fascinating.
Oh, yes. No, they took several days to apologise, of course.
Yeah, because
at least 3 days, I think it was.
The best ones are when you don't understand what you've done wrong.
Yeah.
Which is clearly what they've all had, because there's throughout, it's such a 1970s thinking of running a tournament, of people who it's fascinating, like the bubble they must live in to do that. And then all of a sudden the entire world comes and looks and goes, what the fuck are you doing? And then you have to scramble and go, oh, what did we do wrong? How do we make it stop? How do we make it? It's not about what we did wrong, because these aren't mistakes. That's what the chief executive said. What was it? We have made a mistake and this will not ever happen again. And it's like, with maths, you've got to, 1 + 1 = 2. You've said that, but show you're working. You've got to tell me what you did wrong, why it was wrong, why did this happen?
Yeah.
What are you going to do to make sure that this doesn't happen again? And in order to have a meaningful response to that, they would need to have come on such a long personal journey of discovery about the way the world works and misogyny and the problems that women face generally, that you would never get to the starting point of going. So for our live show in September, if I said, oh, we should get a load of attractive women to come on stage with us, that's mad. And it's interesting, so pointing that bit, so that was the chief executive. You think, oh, that's really important. He was really apologetic, going, oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake, that won't happen again. So they sort of want to push that aside. Of course, behind all of it is the money incentive. They want the massive, they were having another Rafael Nadal, and having one of the biggest tournaments on the calendar. And they want it to be all. So when women were kept in cupboards forever, that sort of Carlos Alvarez celebration, that's all we saw. That's all anyone ever saw. But then when you put women up supposedly at an equal level, suddenly it makes you go, what the fuck? What's wrong with you people? And so then onto the last bit, because it's got slapping a woman in the face with a shit cake, sexualizing young women because you think it's either a joke, which is bad in one way, or it's serious, which is bad in another way. But I think if it's serious, you can actually talk. You can have a conversation with someone who thought that this was seriously a good idea. But when what I think is Feliciano Lopez's problem, I think he thinks it's hilarious. I think he thinks it's hilarious to put models on court, and hilarious that she got a small cake, because he was one of the people on Twitter, and he said, I'm surprised by this reaction after this gesture. 1, Carlos had just won his match to reach the final. 2, he was playing on centre court. 3, the tournament is played in Spain, even though it's an international event.
That doesn't make any sense.
And what I wrote,
what
I wrote in response to that is, I'm surprised because he's a man and you're a silly little woman who needs to watch her figure. That's the subtext of that, is why would you give a woman a small cake? Because, well, she's going to have to watch her figure. And that tone is, I can't imagine hearing like the amount of times women here are talked like that, and they go, why did you do this? I'm angry about this thing. And they go, what are you talking about? There's nothing to be angry about here.
You don't need to worry.
And the last thing you said to me was, were they gagged? Absolutely, yes. Obviously,
Yes.
yeah, 100% yes. Because that the worst thing you can say to a man as a woman is to criticize them
Yeah.
and
I've
say,
never watched a tennis final where there hasn't been a speech from the winners and losers. Like, it's the first time I've ever seen it not happen. And the fact that they took days to apologise and then didn't explain why it happened, which everyone was wanting to know, and we still don't know why, which obviously points to the fact that they were gagged. It's like, hello, can you please just put an explanation? It's just dodging it completely, and it wasn't very good at all. No.
it's like nothing to see here. We just want it to go away.
Just brush it under the carpet and we'll be back next year. Yeah. Interesting times.
To bring the end of our satire, Feliciano Lopez is going to be the tournament director for the Davis Cup.
Is he? What, Spain's one? Or the whole Davis Cup?
The whole thing.
The whole thing?
Yeah.
Okay. So, how intriguing.
Failing upwards.
At least it's not the Billie Jean King Cup, which is the women's version of the Davis Cup. That would have been ironic. But yeah, that's interesting. I'll keep an eye out for any more faux pas at the Davis Cup in the years to come. Yes, how funny. But yes, moving on then swiftly to the French Open, which followed in the lead up, all the clay court tournaments leading up to the French Open. And the French Open, the tournament director who took over in 2022, Amélie Mauresmo, former professional tennis player herself, French tennis player, came in fresh-faced and excited and full of potential to do something new. The first female tournament director at Roland Garros. And it was a complete disappointment last year. They had this new format with night matches, the premier match of the day. And as you might remember last year, 2022, they had 10 night matches. 9 of those were men's matches, and 1 of those was a women's match. That was the premier match of the day. The match designed to be the one that draws in the most eyeballs and that people pay separately for to come and just see that one match. And of course, Tennis Podcast were brilliant. Interviewed her, did a load of follow-up questions, and asked if she wanted to change things for next year. And they said, yes, you will see improvement next year. Roland 2023, we've got 10 night matches. 9 of those were men's matches, and 1 of those was a women's match. Well, hold on there. Where's the improvement? So, dutifully, the Tennis Podcast eventually got hold of Amélie Mauresmo, who explained that there had been improvement because on the slightly smaller show court, I think it was the Suzanne Lenglen show court, which is like the court number 1 to centre court at Wimbledon. They said, oh no, well, we've put more men's matches at the start of the day on Suzanne Lenglen, so it's more evened out. Because they claimed that if they had a lot of women's matches at the start of the day, when, as we all know from the French crowd, the stadiums are completely dead because everyone's having their lovely late lunches and all their rich affluent friends come to have their lunches and all talk over lunch, and then they saunter over to the tennis sort of mid-afternoon to late evening when the real matches and the real tennis stars come out to play, i.e. the men, because they play later in the day than the women. They said, oh no, well, we've put some men's matches on at the start of the day on the second court. That's evened things up a little. What are your thoughts, Matt?
Well, there's always an excuse for not doing the bold thing. There's always an excuse for not doing the right thing that makes them sound like, because she will have spent every second of the years that she's been doing this and leading up to it, having nothing but crusty, old, dusty, wealthy white men saying, now don't rock the boat. I don't want anything to change. Everything is perfectly fine as it is. We're just going to have you up there because you're not one of the girly girls. You're one of these feminazis. You're one of the good ones. And that, even with she may have the best intentions or she may not care, either way, she gets to the point where they just end up not wanting to talk to people because you go, why aren't you doing this obvious thing that you're obviously only doing because you don't think women's matches, people will want to watch women's matches? That's the truth at the core of it.
Yeah,
and
it is.
That's, so say that, just say that, and then everyone can go, what the fuck are you talking about? And then we can go on from there. So that's why you've never heard a racist person say that they're racist, or a person who hates women say, oh yeah, well, I think that because I hate women, because those points are indefensible and easily torn apart from one reason or another. So it's easy just not to speak.
Yeah.
And Tim Henman, silly bugger, he said about it, it's easy for people on the outside to just be thinking it's all about the match court, but no, it's not. It's about hotels, transport, practice, food on site, and all the different elements. She really has the knowledge and expertise to make these improvements. And you just go, bullshit, just excuses, because the thinking of the powerful people is that no one wants to watch women's matches.
I think she's fighting a lot of very, like you say, crusty old established people who don't want any change. And I think that's going to take a long time to be put in place. And I think I want to believe that she has the best of intentions, because her track record shows that she does care about those things. And it's hard, but I think they could have done a lot more. They could have done a lot more than they did this year. They could have had a women's match and a doubles match if they're worried about it not lasting long enough, because women's is best of 3 and not best of 5. You can't really argue that, though, because what if there's a retirement in the men's match, or someone gets injured, or someone steamrolls somebody 6-love, 6-love, 6-love? That's over in an hour and a half, the same length as the women's match. So you can't argue that would be a reason to put a longer men's match on at the last of the day. But that was one of the other excuses as well. And you remember the phrase that she used rather unfortunately last year. She said that the men's matches were the more attractive matches, which I think was perhaps a language thing, but it wasn't the best phrase to be using. And I think she's realised and has stepped away from that narrative a little now. But there are ways to make it work. But the trouble is, the most powerful people there don't want to listen. And I think that's the main problem at the end of the day, is that she's fighting too many powerful older white men who want it to be a certain way, because that's how it's always been.
It's tricky because there's the same problem with American politics at the minute, because there's the Democrats and Republicans, right? And all this still blows my mind. Corporations can donate unlimited amount of money to political campaigns. So pretty much all of them answer to donors. They don't have, and so when they're fighting each other, it's just theatre to keep people distracted. And there's an organisation called the Justice Democrats that ran candidates, progressive candidates, revolutionary candidates who didn't take any corporate money. And they fought like hell against these corrupt establishment incumbents, and they beat them, these incredibly revolutionary people. But once they got into Washington, they have been completely neutralized. Because all of a sudden, the people around them who they'd been fighting, they're their friends and colleagues, going, oh, we're not the bad guys, don't worry. We're not the bad guys. Republicans are the bad guys. And so they're in this position, wildly popular, massive social media presences, the world. They are on the right side of history. They are on the right place of everything. But they waste their platform attacking Republicans when the problem is the Democrats in their own party. And so it's pointless having them in these places when they're failing to use them. They're failing to be the revolutionary person that the moment requires. Because what a revolutionary woman would do in this role in the tournament is to come out the first day with a load of press conferences and say, every conversation that I've had leading me up to this point has been me saying, oh, don't worry, I won't change anything, to these boring, old, wealthy, racist, misogynist men who think they run the world. They have been telling me exactly what I need to do and what I mustn't do. And now I'm here and they can't fire me. I've signed the contract for 3 years.
Yeah.
We're going to make, it's time for a revolution. And she seems to have just been neutralized. And then it's hard to, if you've got the best intentions, and I don't know, I've never been in a position of power like that. I don't know how hard it is to maintain or develop a revolutionary spirit and get into that position of power. But it's not enough, and it needs to be.
I think the women obviously spoke out. Some of them spoke out at the time about it, about how bad it was. But like, I think there needs to be a more united front, as it were. They need to speak out more about it. I think, in fact, during the night match, let me double check who it was playing. Yeah, Arina Sabalenka, previously mentioned, was playing against Sloane Stephens, and Arina won. And in her speech after the match, she said, "Oh, well, I wasn't expecting a big crowd," as if to reiterate the point that she knows that people think that women's matches aren't very popular, and she was expecting it not to be popular because it was women playing, which is quite sad in a way, really, that she doesn't even have the belief that the women's game is great to watch, and she's in the middle of it. She's world number 2, so it's not the best. I think, I'm not saying they take where they are for granted when you think about the history of the women's game and how they had to fight so hard to even get a professional tour going and to have equal prize money, which still isn't the case across the year. It is in Grand Slams, but not for all of the tournaments, the smaller tournaments, and certainly not, it's not across the board. So there is still work to be done, but I think the drive and passion that was happening in the 60s and 70s, I think, is just not there anymore. And it needs to be there if any other change is going to happen in the future, I think.
Yeah, revolutionary. That's what the moment requires. And it's too easy to be neutralized. If you've got problem is it shouldn't be up to the players playing. It should be the players before them should have built it up more than this, so that you don't.
Yeah, the momentum's essentially been lost, hasn't it? Yeah. Since those changes, but yeah, it just needs a spark to start it off again, one would hope. But yeah.
There's another thing that interested me in the French Open. Did you see about Miyu Kato being?
We hope you enjoyed that episode of Gaming the System. If you want to support us, you can donate to us through our PayPal by sending it to wearegamingthesystem@gmail.com. If you want to send us a one-off donation. If you want to donate to us monthly, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/gamingthesystem. Until next time, bye-bye.